Good morning, everybody. I want to say thank you so much for joining us. My name is Valerie Leonard. I am the founder of Nonprofit Utopia, and I wanted to talk to you today about what not to do when you start a new nonprofit organization. All right. So often we think that it's simple to start a new organization. And when I say a new organization, I'm talking about a nonprofit organization. But the truth of the matter is, it's really more complex to start a nonprofit organization than it is to start a for profit. There are many, many rules that we need to follow because, in exchange for being a nonprofit, organizations have to have a certain level of ethics and disclosure, and they also need to make sure that they are not in business to take advantage and get profits. All right. So, one of the first things I would suggest that you not do, this is a very common thing, is when you start your nonprofit organization, do not describe it in, I guess, common terms. And when I say don't describe it in common terms, I'm talking about don't talk about the purpose in common terms. All too often, when we make responses to the application, we are using common sense. And I can tell you from experience that using common sense on these forms will definitely take you in a place that you don't want to go. So when you do your articles of incorporation, the very first thing you want to do is describe the purpose, and you want to use the exact language that the IRS is providing. If you don't have that language up front when you do your application to the IRS, then it will definitely be returned to you, and that's going to it's going to actually cause you to waste more time going back and forth with the IRS, and you definitely don't want to do that. And then another common mistake that you don't want to repeat is you don't want to leave out, the in the articles of incorporation, you don't want to leave out the language that indicates that nobody who is a director or an officer will in fact get any profits. Again, this is a nonprofit organization, and under the law, no nonprofit director can actually get earnings. All right. And then sometimes you can have all of your language correct, but still not get tax exemption. And the reason for this, one of the most common reasons is there may be questions that suggest that you have a conflict of interest in the board. For example, they want to understand the board relationships and understand whether or not there's any family relationships on the board, whether you have existing business relationships with board members. And it's not to say that you can't have these relationships, but if it gets to a point where it looks like, there's a whole bunch of conflicts of interest on the board, and that you are probably trying to enrich yourselves as a board, by keeping all the wealth within the board, as opposed to being involved in a charitable purpose, then you definitely will not get tax exempt status. There's going to trigger questions from the IRS. And then another thing that comes about is when you're trying to explain the activities, right? So if you're explaining your activities, you got to make sure that those activities are consistent with your mission, right? So if your mission is to improve health status and you're not engaging in activities that will, in fact, support uh, changing the health status, that could be cause for a red flag. Um, Another minor problem, but it is really common, is making sure that you don't have a director, trustee, or principal officer sign on the application, right? So, I mean, it's a little minor thing, but it's very, very, very common for people to do. Another problem that you don't want to have is not providing sufficient financial data. When you do your application, you have to do a budget, right? And your budget should be a 3-year budget, and it should be consistent with what it is you said that you're going to do. So you start off with your mission, right, on your tax exempt application, and then you describe what it is you're going to do. That'll be your narrative, and then you'll also talk about your fundraising and all that good stuff. But then you go and you have a budget, and you need to make sure that that budget does in fact capture all of the activities that you said. If your budget is inconsistent with what you said that you're going to do, then that is also a cause for red flag. Another common problem, very, very simple problem, is a failure to attach the articles of incorporation to the 501c3 application. And remember, when you start the process, your first step is to do your articles of incorporation with your state, right? And not only do you have to include that articles of incorporation that you get back from the state, saying that the state does in fact, recognize you as an organization in your particular state, but you also need to track all of the changes. So if you have made any changes to your articles of incorporation in between the time you actually incorporate it with the state and then the time you actually file for tax exempt status, you need to attach all of that. And the IRS is going to want to understand, what the changes are, why the changes occurred, and they also want to know that the board of directors has in fact approved those changes. So that is another mistake that you don't want to make. You don't want to be in a position where you have not attached your articles of incorporation and you have not shown any amendments. If you make those mistakes, the IRS will then, send you a list of questions and ask you to attach it. Another problem is people not letting the IRS know when their fiscal year ends or starts. And your fiscal year end, it may or may not be the calendar year. The calendar year is typically January through December, but your fiscal year may be something different. A common fiscal year ends June 30th. So they might go from July 1st to June 30th. Another common fiscal year end is October. And the rule of thumb is you want to align your fiscal year end with the area where you are most likely to have the most activity. And many organizations also tend to align their fiscal year end with the fiscal year end of their main funder. So, common fiscal year ends are the calendar, which is December, October, or June 30th. And it only takes, a little bit of effort to indicate when your fiscal year end is. So it's really important to be very detail oriented. So before you submit your tax exempt application, which is Form 1023, make sure that you read it over and over and over again and make sure that you do a cross-reference between, what the application calls for and what you have provided. And when in doubt, make sure you have folks to proofread what you have. All right. And then another problem is, people might not attach the appropriate schedules. So if you're starting a school, you need to make sure that you attach a schedule that outlines how your school is going to operate. If there is any backup that would, give clarification as to how your program is going to run, you want to make sure you do that. And so basically, the rule of thumb is to make sure that you provide enough information so that when the IRS is looking at your application, everything is answered and they don't need to come back to you. All right. And then another common one is not attaching the user fee. So just because you're filing with the government doesn't mean that it's not, that there's no cost. So you got to make sure that you actually apply that user fee. All right. So if you if you have any comments, you can share them. If you have any questions, if you want to talk about your experience starting a new organization, if you're in the process of working on your application, if you have any questions. And thank you. Got to go, but be blessed. That's from Rocket Mike. Um, Again, this is a very, very short video. I just wanted to caution you about some of the things that you should not do. You know, if you're interested in starting a nonprofit organization for yourself, I suggest that you first of all go with your state. For Illinois, it's the Secretary of State. You should go to CyberDrive, Illinois, and on there you will be able to download the application. And when I say application, it's the articles of incorporation, right? And you also need to go to the Attorney General's office and download what we call Form CO1 and Form CO2. The first thing you do is complete the application to Secretary of State, and they also have a booklet that will walk you through the process. And I can tell you too, I also coach organizations as to how they could start their nonprofit organization. But if you're looking to do it yourself, go and download that document from the Secretary of State's office. It's CyberDrive, Illinois, and I believe it's also found on the Attorney General's office. And they will walk you through starting a nonprofit, but make sure that when you do your articles of incorporation, that you do in fact include the IRS language. So there's going to be language around what your purpose is, and that purpose needs to uh, follow the exact language that the IRS has. So you're going to copy that verbatim. And so that's for the purpose, but you also need to make sure that you have additional provisions attached. And those are not necessarily required by the state of Illinois. And what I found too is from working with other states, this seems to be consistent. The state will require you to have one set of requirements satisfied, but those requirements don't necessarily satisfy the requirements of the IRS. So make sure that before you even submit to the state, that you're reading what's required from the IRS. So when you submit to your state, everything is already in good order, and that'll save you a lot of time and headache and heartache on the back end, right? So you want to go to CyberDrive, Illinois, and download the articles of incorporation. And if you live in another state, make sure you go to your Attorney General's office, make sure you go to your Secretary of State's office and understand what their process is. All right. And if you're in the state of Illinois, after you complete your articles of incorporation, after you do that, making sure that you have the purpose um, in the same format that the IRS requires, and after you have the other provisions, then you submit that to the Secretary of State's office. And then you also want to file Form CO1 and CO2. And what those forms do is let the let the Attorney General office know that you're in business, right? And not only are you in business, you are also soliciting funds. If you don't do that form in a timely fashion, then you're going to have to pay a $150 late fee. It only costs $15 to file, but if you start raising funds before that application is filed, then you are in danger of having to pay that late fee of $150. Okay, so once you get your form CO1 and CO2 completed, you also need to file with the Attorney General's office the form AG 990, which is the equivalent of the federal form 990, but it's for the state. So the Attorney General's office is going to want to look for that form CO1 and CO2, as well as that AG 990. And once you do all that, then you'll be in a position to start your application for Form 1023. Remember, you can't do your tax exempt application without having your articles of incorporation filed and returned from the state. And you can't raise funds in the state of Illinois, and I'm sure with any other state, without filing with the Attorney General's office. All right. Um, Good morning, Valerie. I'm working with the Veteran Service Organization looking to make certain we are squared away to receive funds. All right, Byron, I'm not sure if you're still there, but if you're still there, can you indicate whether or not whether or not the organization has tax exempt status, or you're finding yourself in a position where you need to make sure that you're in compliance? Either way, I can help you. Just make sure that you contact me. It looks like you might not be with us, but Byron, I will look you up and see what your issue is. All right. Good morning, Dale. Thank you for joining us. I'm not quite sure if you're still here. All right. Okay. Thanks, Byron. It does have federal tax exempt status. I get the sense that you just want to make sure that you're in compliance. I can give you a checklist of everything that you need to do to make sure that you're in compliance. So that's a checklist of all the forms that you need to fill out at the state level as well as the federal level, just to make sure that you're in compliance. All right. And in the event that I forget, um, my email address is Valerie F. Leonard at nonprofitutopia.com. Please email me, Byron, and this goes for anybody. If you have any questions, I can answer them. And then I do have that checklist for compliance. Even though this wasn't necessarily meant to be, a live stream to talk about how you start an organization or staying in compliance, you can see that really compliance starts, from the point that you really start your organization. Okay. When you say, I'm not quite sure what you mean about direct asset donations, Dale. If you can explain it, is if that's a certain process. I've not heard it described quite that way as direct asset donations. Are you talking about in-kind donations of stuff like equipment? Um, Again, just if you can clarify, I'm not quite sure what you mean. Donations of assets other than money, non-cash assets, things like computers, or are you talking about something else? All right. And Byron, sure. Okay, not a problem. Yeah, just email me and I can send you that list of everything that you need. All right. Are there any questions, any comments? This was a very, very short video. I could, come back and walk you through compliance. I can come back and walk you through, just at very high levels what you need to do to start your own organization. And just remember too, Nonprofit Utopia does coach folks through the process. We will walk you through the entire process, let you know what you need to do at the state level, exactly what forms you need. We'll proofread them before we let them out of our site. We will also walk you through the application process for 1023, read your application, and help you to actually design your programs and put everything in a format such this is really almost like your first proposal for funding, and you'll be able to hit the ground running. All right, so if you have any questions after I'm gone, you can email me at Valerie F. Leonard at nonprofitutopia.com, or you can post. I'll make sure that I check those messages, or you can, like I said, you can email me. Either way it goes, I will let you know. And if you're interested in our coaching program, I can also share the link with you for that. And we will work with you to take you through the entire process and get it done within 90 days. And when I say get it done, we'll help you fill out all of the papers you need. We'll help you to prepare for your first meeting of the board of directors and submit, so that all you have to do is wait for the IRS. We have no control over how long it takes the IRS to process, but we can help you get everything you need done at the state and federal level within 90 days. Okay, yeah, Dale, I would say that I'm not an expert in that, especially when it comes to Bitcoins and stock for nonprofits and all that good stuff. But generally speaking, you would record the value of an asset on your books like you would anything else. So if it's non-cash, you record the value. If it's a asset that is depreciating, then you'll record what we call the book value, or the and that is the net asset value. So you're taking the value of the asset less depreciation. If you're talking about stocks and bonds, you're going to record the market value of those securities as of the day that you receive them, right? And then that stays on the books until you actually dispose of the asset. And at that point, you will record the market value for what it is that you sold the asset for. And the same thing for those assets, like cars, equipment, anything that depreciates when you sell it and it has depreciated, then you're going to record it at that value. Like I said, I don't know anything about Bitcoins and all of that good stuff. That sounds like an accountant's question, but that's how I have handled those things. As a nonprofit director, we were not, we didn't have stocks and bonds, but we did have some equipment donated to us, and we had to learn how to record it at market rate. Not market rate, I'm sorry, at the book value. All right. Any other questions? All right. So thank you guys so much. Again, I know this is shorter than normal, but I just felt it, really important to talk to you about what not to do when you're starting an organization. And if you need to see copies of the exact language, I can share that too. Again, my email address is Valerie F. Leonard at nonprofitutopia.com. Okay, awesome. All right, Dale, and good luck. And my email address and all that good stuff. So if you have any questions, let me know. All right, you guys, take care. Bye-bye.